Lord, yes, papi, hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no bed. I was brought up and told to have no bed. I was brought up and told to have no bed.
Welcome to the Full Circle Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, David Roberts, along with the OG Dr. Neil Holmes. Missing today is the oral historian, Andre Taylor. He's recovering from surgery. We wish him a speedy recovery. So, Doc, let's talk quickly about the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And, when she was first confirmed, I was at work and, I heard one of my coworkers was screaming, woo, I'm like, what happened? She was like, she was confirmed, so on and so forth. We had a decent conversation. But what I thought about at that moment was, you remember in the Malcolm X movie when the players, they were in the prison yard, when Malcolm was in the prison yard walking with Brother Baines, right? And so Malcolm or Denzel asked the guy who was winning, and he's like, we're killing them. Jackie Robinson was just called up to the major league, so on and so forth. And then Brother Baines said, sure, they think calling one Negro up to the major leagues is supposed to make us forget about 400 years of oppression, so on and so forth, that kind of speech. And so I guess he was hearkening, that to tokenism. And so sometimes I think about that, not to be negative, but when everybody's so excited about like this confirmation, I guess I'm thinking realistically, what does this mean? What is it going to mean for our people? And are we getting too excited over being thrown a bone? What do you say to that?
Well, I think sisters are getting excited because they see a black woman on the bench, and the key thing we have to look at is where, from the point of view of like bourgeois American democracy, where is where's the court and where's the court been? And if you look at what's happening now, in 2012, 2011, somewhere in 2013, the court got rid of like Section 4, the Voting Rights Act, and that's part of dismantling what many people call the second Reconstruction period. I mean, and right now, I guess we have close to about 20 states, or probably even more states, that are enacting all kinds of voter repression laws because of the imbalance on the court. So the balance on the court's important. She doesn't change the balance because basically the person that she's replacing, she's just replaced, and he was kind of and she clerked for him. So many ways she might be maybe just a little to the left of him, but that's not adding a new person on the court. So you have a 6-3, kind of pretty much a 6-3 balance with these very reactionary, more than conservative justices on the court who are really trying to turn back the hands of time. And everybody, almost everyone now is what they call an originalist, which is Clarence Thomas's. He's the most consistent originalist, basically saying that you look at this Constitution from the point of view of the so-called founders. And if you look at the founders of 40% of those were slave owners. Another probably 40 so percent were people who were slave traders. So you're talking about basically people who made their money either shipping people back and forth into slavery, or people who were putting people to work and getting rich off of enslaved people. And so you want to let those people guide you for the rest of this thing.
Right.
So,
I don't see how any black man could be an originalist. I can be open to some brothers are conservative, so on and so forth. But to be a black man who's an originalist, I can't fathom that.
Well, you got to remember that Clarence Thomas is married to a woman. His wife, when they went out to dinner in a town in Northern Virginia somewhere, that had a Black Lives Matter sign up, in front of the restaurant or maybe into the town. His wife tore that down. And so, I mean, there's a conservative guy who wrote in a paper, a magazine recently that he grew up in a very conservative family and a very conservative community. But even in that community, her family would consider kind of wacko folks. And she was a strong believer in trying to overturn the last election. So, and you got to remember that Clarence Thomas voted when Gore had the election stolen from him. People don't remember that election where you really had a theft. Gore's election was stolen from him in Florida.
Mhm.
George Bush, young George Bush was elected. And he was one of the justices who voted to, uphold that theft. So he's been there. He's been, to understand Clarence Thomas, really, you have to understand that he grew up in a Black community under his grandfather's wing. His grandfather was supporting people who were going out to do demonstrations and stuff, basically opening the way from Clarence, but Clarence Thomas never had to go out and do any demonstrations.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about his wife for a second. And here's why I want to do that. And I know this original conversation didn't start off as focusing on Clarence Thomas specifically, but you mentioned his wife and she tore down a Black Lives Matter sign, right? So when Ketanji Brown Jackson was confirmed to the Supreme Court, I saw that Dr. Boyce Watkins actually wrote something or posted something about we've never had a Black Supreme Court justice who was actually married to a Black person, because Thurgood Marshall, and of course, I think his record is beyond reproach, but we're just talking strictly about not being married to a Black person. I think he was married to an Asian woman at the time. And then, of course, Clarence Thomas, and then Ketanji Brown Jackson. And then you look at the vice president, Kamala Harris, and she's also not married to an African-American. So if we take the political correct lens off for a second and just talk, do you think that means anything as far as the mindset? And here's why I say that, because I remember Dr. Umar Johnson saying, your first commitment, as a African-American, if you're a Black man, your first commitment is to a Black woman. Same thing, if you're a Black woman, your first commitment is to a Black man. If you can't make that commitment, you're gonna have a hard time getting respect from me. So do you think it means anything, nothing, or somewhere in between that all these prominent African-Americans in these roles are not married to African-Americans? Well,
I think it means something sort of in between, in the sense that I think your first really commitment is to your community and your what we call the African nation from my perspective, and your other commitments kind of grow out of that. But at the same time, people's people are human, right? And humanity goes beyond racial boundaries and all that. But at the same time, if you are trying to build a community, you're trying to build something. And now the question is, where do these folks, what we're looking at is people who have lived in, elite institutions, Harvard, Yale. Everybody on the Supreme Court is either from Harvard or Yale. And there's one person, Barrett, who's went to Notre Dame. So other than her, everybody's from one of those two schools. And I spent a summer at Harvard, with this, we were there doing a summer institute on civil rights. And it was a bunch of us, older kind of African-Americans or African people. We were hanging out. And I remember this sister come up to us from she was from the continent, and she was a student there. She said, you guys are different. You're not like the students here, because you look, at that time, that was like 2003, 2002, and you wouldn't see two Black folks together, more than two Black people together. they're all, if you saw 3 black people, there'll always be a third person of a something race. And she said, I don't know what's going on, but people don't seem to here get along as a group. And so we're looking at this notion that somehow integration is our, this is what I think. I don't know, but
Right.
you look at integration as our way to the future, and you have people in this little tiny thing, where you go to schools like Stanford, maybe. I don't know where. Well, Kamala went to Morgan. I mean, I went to
Howard.
Howard,
Right.
but her, I think her mom went to Stanford, and her dad was from Jamaica, her mom was from India, and which is but you end up in a place like San Francisco, Berkeley, and a place where black folks are being pushed out of those places.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have a lively black community in a lot of parts of San Francisco. They got pretty much pushed all the way out. Mostly out. I think San Francisco is lucky if they're like 5% black in that city now. And so people get into that small, that tiny world of elites, and that's who they tend to associate with, and that's who they marry. So it's a question of nation and class.
Mm-hmm.
But so the fact that you see 1 or 2 versus the fact that you see all, in those kind of positions is kind of interesting. But the fact that they all coming out of Ivy League schools says a lot about it too. And a lot of students at those schools are students who are already children of, let's say, interracial marriages and such. So it's not that uncommon. So you see her white husband, but you also see the fact that she wears braids. I mean, it's a lot of different things in that imagery.
It's nuanced, definitely.
Yeah, it's a lot of things in that particular imagery. But but back to Thomas again. He's someone who had doors open for him by people who sacrifice, going to jail, getting beat up. I'm talking about in where he grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and who didn't get the benefits. But I don't think he ever publicly acknowledged that, or acknowledged the fact that that there was a debt owed,
Mm-hmm.
to those, again, to the community, regardless of who he married. Let's say he had married, the same person, or a person from the same racial group, another white woman, but he acknowledged his debt to that community, and acknowledged that he owed something to that community. And he only had two rulings that I kind of agree with, but beyond that, not much. So I think he never felt, because he didn't participate in those types of things. He talked about going to the breakfast program, Panther breakfast program, when he was up in going to Yale. But then he said he went to a demonstration and might have gotten be a little too much for him or something.
Right.
I looked at his first son's name. First son is named Jamal. His first wife was black. So somewhere in there, he was actually recruited by old man George Bush. They had a meeting out in San Francisco where they just brought in a handful of what they thought were potentially important black conservatives, and they groomed them and grew them and all of that. So, so that, that's the way I look at it. I look at, you owe a duty to your community first, even beyond your
who you marry.
Personal, yeah. But who you marry is going to reflect that many ways.
Let's touch on that too. When you talk about duty to the community. This is something else I want to talk about. Everybody's been talking about the Will Smith, Chris Rock, altercation, from people saying it was wrong and some people understand it, so on and so forth. And I promise I wasn't going to discuss this thing, but I did want to discuss one aspect of it. The people that were upset that Will Smith did it because a Black man produced it, Will Packer, and he was up for, and Will Smith was up for an award for, a Black father that was very committed, Richard Williams, so on and so forth. And some people just say, oh, it made us look bad because it was Black on Black, so on and so forth. And I guess my question, it's a two-part question or a two-part discussion. The Oscars, Grammys, all of that has never really been for our community. So sometimes I still wonder why we get still excited about it, and like, oh, somebody Black is producing it, so on and so forth. Good for him, but I'm not looking for the Oscars to ever be for us. Two, when they talked about making, it made us look bad, and I'm wondering, who are we worried about looking bad to? Like to who? I mean, do you think it's people that, we look bad to just because of the way we look? It doesn't matter how we behave. It's like they have a certain, feeling about our community, and that's just what it is and what it's going to be. What's your thoughts on that? First, do you have any thoughts on the slap at all?
Well, yeah, I'm not a big, like you, I'm not a big Oscars person. Actually, I looked at the thing. I usually don't. I looked at it by accident because I just been looking at Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on
Netflix.
The streaming thing,
right?
And it was very interesting because in that movie you had a kid named Levy who was very talented and so forth, who was a young man in a band of older men who were and they were having these discussions about race and all this other stuff, and told him, watch out, because the guy that he thought was going to help him get rich might rip him off. And then toward the end, he did get ripped off by that same white record company owner. But when he got pissed off about that, he ended up killing one of the Black men who had been trying to counsel him. And maybe they ribbed him a little too much. He was actually quite talented. So I was thinking about who was he really mad at when he slapped Chris Rock? Was he really mad at Chris Rock? Was he mad at himself? Because I don't know, they say he was laughing first, when the thing first went down.
Right.
And you had some strange comedy in that whole thing. The whole thing was kind of weird.
Right.
But the people who developed Hollywood created that thing for themselves, and it helps give artists and entertainers, they actors, they want to get it because it gives a boost to their income.
Right, their career, definitely.
Yeah, because they start selling more, whatever that is. But some great actors never got that award. And the thing is, capitalism as a system, this is just me talking here now, but capitalism as a system creates artificial scarcity. So is there just one movie that's better than every other movie? Is there one record, in the Grammys that's just better than every other record? Can you say that this is just absolutely the best record of the year, the very best artist of the year?
Right.
Even the Super Bowl, you go to the Super Bowl, hey, the Super Bowl champ, if they played that same game, that same team the next day, or even if they played maybe the worst team in the league the next day, would they win?
Right.
Who is the best? Who's the best on any given day, or after, maybe after 17 weeks now, I guess you can add it up and say something, but who is actually the best? How many Will Smiths are? I mean, he's incredibly talented,
Right.
How many of them are there out there? How many, you know, how many anybody is there out there?
Right.
Musicians, singers, athletes who perform in the public that are out there, that if you had zillions of them actually doing what they do, it wouldn't be a capitalist cultural enterprise.
Right. And
Because it would just be the community doing its thing.
I'm gonna say probably the best actors are the ones that never usually come to movies. They are stage actors.
Yeah, Bill Clinton is a great one. Obama's a good actor. What's he called? Well, he was on TV anyway. Trump. He's a great actor. He acts, acts like acts like he thinks a president's supposed to act. All of these are actors. So you got plenty of people real professional actors, plenty of people who never get that opportunity, who might be any given day, any time. So they create this thing and we get all caught up into it. It's just like you're talking about the marriage thing. It's all integration.
Right.
We got to be acknowledged by this to be important. If we're not acknowledged by the Oscars, if we're not acknowledged by the Grammys, it's not important.
And I just don't understand why we haven't been able to move past that. Like we've always been in this situation where, if we just do this, like even World War II, if we just go off and fight in World War II, when we get back, we'll be accepted as full citizens. And so our brothers went and fought in World War II, come back, their white counterparts can get to, veterans funding to buy their homes, but Black soldiers couldn't, but right. Then we just keep on, I guess, reaching for that. I remember the sister Shahrazad Ali that wrote The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman. And I'm not endorsing that book per se. I don't want any arrows. But I remember her being on a talk show. I think it was Donahue. And she was on there with some white supremacists. And her and the white supremacists were actually getting along fairly well, because he was saying, I don't want to live near you. And she was saying, I don't want to live near you. She was like, I'm not like one of these other, African Americans. They want y'all. She's like, they want y'all to love them. I don't, So it's like, I didn't agree with everything she said, but in that instance, the way her interaction, I totally understood and agreed with. Is like, it's almost like searching for validation from someone that's never going to give it to you in a way, right. And so that's why I personally never get excited about the Oscars or, Grammys, even going back to when MTV first came out, and they didn't play Black artists. And I remember Rick James, of course, he's an artist. I understand MTV is this new thing and it's big. And so I can understand why Rick James was saying they don't play Black artists, so on and so forth. But I wasn't looking for them to play Black artists. And, because I figured they were going after a particular crowd. And I said, somebody needs to come up with something for us. And, eventually BET started back when it had meaning, BET started and they had Video Soul and so on and so forth that provided an outlet for Black artists. Of course, then BET became something else, but that's a whole nother discussion. But to me, I'm more into just like having our own, platforms and, validating for ourselves, validating ourselves with our work. Even like with hip hop, there was no hip hop Grammy at first. And then when they did have a hip hop Grammy, it was always for a very commercial rap song, and then of course you had the Source Awards, and that's a whole other story. Right. But it's just interesting to me that as a people, we still seek that validation. And I just wonder if there's going to come a time when we just kind of move as a people, as a whole, just move beyond that. I think the only way we can have that validation is when we begin to see the value in ourselves, and actually to have validation, you have to have your own national
concept about who you are as a nation of people, and not merely someone who's trying to integrate into somebody else's system, and use their value judgments. I mean, that goes back to who do you choose for a mate as well? Who do you see as beautiful? Who do you see as smart? Who do you see as all these other kind of stuff?
Right.
But we have to start with, at least from my perspective, or the perspective of people who are Pan-Africanists, that we have to begin with the question of, we have to begin to develop basically a national base, a place where we say, this is our nation, this is where we base our everything upon, and this is where we make our stand. This is what we defend.
Right.
So right now, people are going crazy saying, "Oh, you got to help these Ukrainians and this, that." But nobody cared when the U.S. was bombing the hell out of Libya, bombing the hell out of Libya. Still, I was reading a thing the other day, Libya, where they used to have the courthouse where they started the whole war against Gaddafi. Now that's sewage flowing all through there.
Yeah.
And they have drug dealers all running all over the place now. And nobody's talking about what America did to Iraq or Syria or to the Congo, or to assassinating people or overthrowing governments like that of Nkrumah. Nobody talks about those as being crimes against humanity.
Right.
The kinds of things that Agent Orange, that's still killing people in Vietnam and Cambodia or Kampuchea or whatever. Nobody's talking about that. The kind of stuff that paraquat they sprayed on all the weed. Nobody's talking about that killing people down in Colombia. That's still killing people who smoked that weed back in the day, and it's still killing people who live in the area where they sprayed it. If you can't call those crimes against humanity, or these people we getting killed every day by police in this country, all across the country. Another one just the other day. Those aren't crimes against humanity. People down there in New Orleans couldn't get any help during Katrina. Hardly any help.
And again, I think it all goes back to seeing things through a particular lens and not seeing it through your own lens.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons we started this. So
yeah, looking at things through your people who are really who are oppressing you, looking at things through the eyeballs of your oppressor.
Right.
It's a dangerous thing.
Exactly. So, hey, Doc, on that note, we can bring this one to a close, especially since we don't have an oral historian today to get his perspective. And next week, we're going to have Welby Broadus. He's a University of Akron alumnus, Akron native. I believe he still lives in Akron, Ohio. And he's written a book, and it's a book for the visually impaired, and how they could still be successful in today's society. And so we're gonna have him. We look forward to having him next week. And as always, Doc, thank you. We didn't have a guest this week, but we'll have one next week, and then we can do this all over again, brother.
Okay, you take care.
All right, you too. Take it easy.
Lord, yes, papi, hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no fear.